Harper Lorraine never meant to return to Manhattan, yet here she was, standing under the glass atrium of Ridgeview Academy, clutching a stack of programs for the school's annual winter showcase. The lights above shimmered like stars against the evening sky, but her hands trembled. Not from fear, from the weight of a past she had buried 6 long years ago. She had rebuilt her life from dust, raised her little boy alone, carried her pregnancy through nights when she couldn't breathe from the pain of what had been taken from her. She had sworn she would never face the man who tried to erase their child. Never hear his voice again, never feel that familiar sting in her chest. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. She wasn't supposed to be near the entrance when the doors opened. She wasn't supposed to look up. She wasn't supposed to recognize the tall figure walking in with the confidence of a man who believes he owns every room he enters. Brandon Keats, her ex-husband. His black wool coat looked expensive, his smile polished, rehearsed the smile he used on investors and journalists who praised him for building an empire from nothing. She knew better. She knew exactly what he had built it on, the pieces of the people he stepped on, including her. For a split second, her breath hitched. Old memories clawed their way back, his cold voice, the pressure on her wrist, the hissed demand. "Get rid of it, Harper. I won't let a baby ruin my future." She almost turned away. Almost. But then Milo, her 6-year-old son, darted from behind the stage curtain, laughter bubbling from him like sunlight. His dark hair, his easy smile. Echoes of a man who had sworn he never wanted him. Brandon froze. No, froze wasn't the right word. He turned pale, as if a ghost had risen from the floor and wrapped icy fingers around his throat. And in that suspended second, Harper understood something with startling clarity. The past wasn't done with them yet. What Brandon did next would change everything. Before the world broke her open, Harper Lorraine had been the kind of woman people overlooked for all the wrong reasons. Gentle, thoughtful, a little too soft for New York's sharp-edged rhythm. She grew up in a quiet coastal town in Maine, where winters were long, summers were short, and kindness was still considered a form of strength. Her childhood dream wasn't fame or wealth. It was building a home filled with the warmth she never quite had. She carried that dream with her when she moved to Manhattan at 25, armed with a scholarship and an old suitcase that smelled faintly of sea salt. She worked tirelessly to become an event scenic designer, sketching stages on napkins during subway rides, learning lighting theory between double shifts, soaking in every detail of the city's grand hotels and gala halls. She believed if you created beauty for others, somehow beauty would find its way back to you. Then she met Brandon Keats. At first, he seemed like everything she hoped for, ambitious yet charming, a man who spoke of futures painted in gold. He liked the quiet steadiness in her, the way she listened without trying to impress him. He said she made him feel anchored in a world of people who only wanted something from him. She mistook that for love. But love, real love, doesn't disappear the moment life becomes inconvenient. Harper learned that too late. When she became pregnant, she thought it would soften his restlessness, ground him the way she had been told children often do. Instead, it exposed a side of him she had never seen. Cold, calculating, terrified of losing control. He spoke of timing, reputation, investors. He said a child would damage his trajectory. The man who once held her as if she were precious now looked at her as if she were a problem. And problems in his world were meant to be eliminated. That night, when he forced the decision on her, when he cornered her with threats, ultimatums, and a voice that no longer sounded human, something inside her cracked, not broken, just awakened. A woman can bend for years, but the moment she realizes she's bending toward her own destruction, she becomes steel. Harper walked away with nothing but her unborn child and a courage she didn't know she had. She rebuilt her life quietly enough for Manhattan to forget her name. But strength has a way of ripening in silence. And now, standing in that school hall with her past staring straight at her, she felt none of the trembling fear she once carried. Only resolve, because Brandon Keats wasn't the only one who had changed. And he was about to learn that the woman he threw away didn't stay broken. Ridgeview Academy wasn't just any school, it was the crown jewel of Manhattan's Upper East Side, a place where old money and new ambitions blended beneath chandeliers imported from Italy and hallways lined with donor plaques in polished brass. Every corner of the building radiated quiet prestige. The The kind of place where people whispered, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Harper still remembered the first time she walked through its grand arched entrance 6 months earlier, Milo's small hand wrapped inside hers. She had been overwhelmed then by the marble floors, the glass artwork suspended like floating constellations, the sweeping view of Central Park stretching just beyond the courtyard. She felt like a visitor in someone else's dream. Now, it was her workplace, her sanctuary, the place where she finally felt like her life was piecing itself back together. As an event scenic designer, she spent countless hours reshaping its performance hall into worlds of imagination, winter wonderlands, enchanted forests, city skylines glowing with hand-painted light. The staff respected her creativity. The children adored her patience. The parents? Well, many still looked at her, the way wealthy New Yorkers often regarded people who weren't part of their circles. But Harper had learned to navigate their polite distance with a reassuring smile. Tonight, the winter showcase carried a different kind of energy, not just festive but electric, humming with the excitement of a night that meant more than songs and costumes. This was Ridgeview's marquee event, a magnet for donors, investors, journalists, and the city's most influential families. And the school board had placed enormous trust in Harper to design the entire show. It was her chance to prove that she could build something extraordinary, not just for her career, but for Milo. The atrium glowed beneath twinkling lights she had strung with her own hands. Rows of velvet-lined chairs filled the hall. Parents in tailored coats and evening dresses moved like a soft tide across the room. And behind the curtains, children chattered nervously while stagehands made last-minute adjustments. Harper stood in the center of it all, clipboard tucked under her arm, listening as the orchestra rehearsed the opening notes. She felt something steady rise in her chest, a quiet pride she hadn't tasted in years. For once, she wasn't the woman running from her past, she was the woman shaping her future. But Manhattan, with all its glittering surfaces, had a way of revealing the things you least wanted seen. And as the doors opened to welcome the final guests, she sensed a shift in the air. A subtle tremor beneath the polished elegance, like a warning whispered through marble walls. Something was coming. Brandon Keats had always been the kind of man people admired before they understood him. On the surface, he was every Wall Street magazine's favorite headline, sharp jawline, flawless suits, the type of confidence that filled a room before he even walked into it. His rise in the real estate world was meteoric, a climb fueled by charm, calculation, and a carefully curated image of a self-made visionary. But charm is just polished armor for a man who's hollow on the inside. The guests at Ridgeview Academy saw a successful entrepreneur arriving fashionably late, his coat trimmed with cashmere, his watch gleaming beneath the atrium lights. They didn't see the man whose ambition had cost more lives than his company ever saved. They didn't see the cold fear behind his eyes, the fear of being exposed for what he truly was. A man terrified of losing control. Harper once knew that fear intimately. During their marriage, Brandon treated love the way he treated business deals, something to negotiate, something to manipulate, something to dominate. When Harper told him she was pregnant, he didn't see the miracle growing inside her. He saw a threat to his timeline, a liability, a crack in the flawless narrative he told investors at rooftop cocktail parties. And in Brandon's world, liabilities had to be eliminated. The night he forced Harper into the decision that shattered their marriage, he spoke with the precision of a man closing a deal. No emotion, no hesitation. Only that voice cold, dismissive, slicing through her hope like broken glass. After the divorce, he flourished publicly. New company headquarters, magazine features, invitations to charity galas he pretended to care about. Photos with influencers who clung to him like ornaments. He built an empire, but he couldn't build peace. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, buried beneath success, beneath applause, lived a truth he refused to acknowledge. He had pushed away the one person who ever loved him, without a price tag. And now, as he stepped into Ridgeview Academy and saw a child who carried the unmistakable imprint of his own face, that buried truth clawed its way to the surface. His breath faltered. His eyes widened. The careful mask he wore slipped just for a moment, but long enough for Harper to see it. Fear. Not guilt, not regret. Fear. He wasn't afraid of the boy. He was afraid of what the boy represented, everything he had tried to bury. Everything he couldn't buy back. And as the hum of the crowd faded into a distant blur, Brandon realized something he had never expected. The past he thought he destroyed had come back, with eyes just like his. The moment Brandon's eyes locked onto Milo, the winter showcase seemed to freeze mid-breath. Conversations dulled into a low hum, the orchestra stumbled over a note, and even the twinkling lights above felt suddenly too bright, as if the entire room understood something monumental had shifted. Harper felt the weight of Brandon's stare long before he took a single step. She could sense it crawling across the polished floor like a cold draft. She swallowed hard, reminding herself she wasn't the fragile woman he once held power over. Not anymore. Not with Milo standing right beside her, clutching her hand as if it were the safest place in the world. Brandon moved first. "Harper?" His voice cracked just barely, but enough to slice through the air. A few nearby parents turned, curious. Ridgeview Academy loved a little drama, especially when it came wrapped in designer coats and whispered scandals. Harper kept her voice calm. "You shouldn't be here, Brandon." He ignored her, eyes pinned on the boy peeking from behind her coat. Who is that?" His voice trembled, the question too sharp, too urgent. Milo blinked up at him with innocent confusion, the same hazel eyes Brandon once saw in the mirror every morning. The resemblance was undeniable, unavoidable, and Ridgeview's parents noticed. A woman in pearls gasped softly. A man beside her whispered, "He looks just like Keats." Another murmured, "Did he have a secret family?" Rumors spread faster than sound. Brandon's composure splintered. "Harper, tell me that's not—" "You lost the right to ask me anything," she cut in, voice steady but trembling underneath with years of buried pain. He stepped closer, desperation coating his words. "I thought you said you got rid of it. You said—" His sentence died when he realized what he had just revealed. Out loud, in public. Around them, several parents stopped pretending not to listen. Harper felt the sting behind her eyes, not from weakness, but from the cruel irony of it all. He had destroyed her once with those very words. And now they were destroying him. "Please," Brandon whispered, reaching out. "I need to know." Before Harper could respond, Milo tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, is that man okay? He looks sick." Laughter rippled through nearby adults, quiet but sharp enough to make Brandon flinch. His face drained of all color, his empire, his image, his carefully polished life crumbling under the weight of a child's innocent truth. And Harper realized this was only the beginning of his downfall. Harper didn't realize she was shaking until she stepped backstage, the velvet curtain falling behind her like a shield she desperately needed. The noise of the atrium faded, replaced by the muted rustle of costumes and the faint smell of paint from her hand-built stage props. She gripped the edge of a table, steadying herself as the magnitude of what had just happened washed over her. Seeing Brandon again was one thing. Hearing him expose the darkest chapter of her life in public was another. Her pulse thudded painfully in her throat. She had spent years burying the memory of that night. The argument, the threats, the way desperation had stripped her voice into a whisper. She had promised herself she would never let anyone make her feel that small again. But the moment Brandon said, "You said you got rid of it," the old wounds tore open. For a moment, she wasn't the capable designer trusted by Ridgeview Academy. She wasn't a mother who built a gentle, safe world for her son. She wasn't even the woman who had survived. She was that terrified girl again, cornered, unheard, dismissed. She pressed a hand over her abdomen, an instinct that never left her, even years after Milo's birth. It felt like she was protecting both her past and her present at once. Then Milo appeared beside her, his costume half on, his hair sticking up in soft curls. "Mommy," he whispered, sensing her distress the way only children can. "Did I do something wrong?" Those 5 words pierced deeper than anything Brandon had said. Harper crouched down, cupping his small cheeks. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Not ever." He nodded, but his eyes, those warm hazel eyes, held confusion and worry far beyond his age. She tucked him gently into her arms, closing her eyes as the room swayed slightly. The exhaustion wasn't physical. It was the emotional weight of years pressing down all at once. She thought she had prepared herself. She thought time had healed more than it actually had. But the truth settled heavily in her chest. She wasn't as far from the wreckage as she believed. Footsteps approached. Soft, deliberate. Dr. Rowan Hale's voice followed, low and steady. "Harper, I saw what happened. Are you all right?" She straightened quickly, wiping her eyes before the tears could fall. "I'm fine. I need a minute." Rowan didn't touch her, but his presence alone felt like a warm hand on her back. "You don't have to be strong every second," he said gently. His eyes softened. "Not with me." And for the first time in years, Harper felt the ache of wanting to trust someone again. But trust, like healing, comes slowly, and tonight had only just begun. Harper had spent years believing she survived alone, that every step she took after the divorce, every night she soothed Milo's small cries, every bill she juggled, every breath she forced herself to take, despite the fear, was hers and hers alone. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. Standing backstage with Rowan's steady gaze anchored on her, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, not from fear this time, but from something she couldn't yet name. A warmth. A recognition. A sense that maybe she wasn't as alone back then as she thought. Rowan hesitated, then spoke. "Harper, there's something I never told you." Her heart stilled. "What do you mean?" He glanced toward Milo, who was now twirling in his little costume, blissfully unaware of the adult's whispered tension. Rowan lowered his voice. "I didn't meet you at Ridgeview. Not for the first time, anyway." Harper blinked. I don't understand." Rowan exhaled slowly. 6 years ago, before Milo was born, you came into the emergency clinic at Street Claire's. You were pale, shaking, crying so hard you could barely speak. I was the attending that night." Her breath caught. Impossible. Yet something in his expression, gentle but pained, made memories flutter at the edge of her mind. A white room. Cold hands. A voice telling her she was safe. She had buried that night so deeply she never connected the dots. Rowan continued. "You were terrified. You kept saying someone wanted to take your baby from you. I didn't know your name then, but I knew you were fighting for that child with everything you had left." Harper pressed a hand against her chest. The weight of his words settled like a dawning sunrise. "You sat with me?" she whispered. "The whole night?" "I did," he answered softly. "You kept apologizing for crying. And I kept telling you that what you were doing protecting your child was the bravest thing I'd ever seen." Her eyes burned. This man, this steady, quiet presence in her son's life, had been there at her darkest moment. Long before she understood her own strength. "And I made myself a promise," he added, voice trembling just slightly. "If fate ever brought you back into my life, I would make sure neither of you ever felt unprotected again." The world around Harper tilted not in fear, but in revelation. She had not survived alone. Someone had seen her. Someone had cared. Someone had stayed. Before she could respond, a voice boomed from the atrium Brandons. "Harper, we're not done talking." The spell shattered, but something inside her had already changed. Because now Harper knew she wasn't facing her past empty-handed. Fate had given her an ally long before she realized she needed one. Harper didn't sleep that night, not because of fear those days were gone, but because something Rowan said kept echoing in her mind. "You don't have to be strong every second." She had spent 6 years being strong every second. 6 years surviving, stretching pennies, swallowing panic, stitching together a life for Milo from sheer determination. But strength, she realized, wasn't just survival. Strength was choosing to rise. The next morning, sunlight streamed into her small apartment overlooking the Hudson. Milo sat at the table eating cereal, swinging his legs, humming the song he would perform at the showcase. Harper watched him, a small smile forming. He was her reason for everything. And now, she had a reason to stop hiding. She walked to her bedroom closet and took out the garment bag she'd been saving for one day. A soft navy dress, simple but elegant, paired with a tailored coat she had spent 3 months saving for. She straightened her hair, applied a touch of makeup, and for the first time in years, didn't feel like she was dressing to blend in. She was dressing to be seen. When she arrived at Ridgeview the following afternoon, the school halls buzzed with whispered rumors. Brandon had caused quite a stir the night before, and people loved a scandal, especially one involving a powerful man unraveling in public. But today, Harper didn't shrink beneath their curiosity. She glided through the hall like she belonged there, as if this life, this confidence, had always been hers. Parents who normally ignored her offered awkward smiles. Teachers complimented her coat. Even the principal did a double take. Rowan noticed her immediately. "You look," he paused, searching for the right word, "unshakable." She felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm trying something new." His smile deepened. "It suits you." Just then, Brandon appeared at the far end of the hall. His hair was unkempt, tie askew in unfamiliar disarray for a man who curated his image with military precision. He froze when he saw her, stunned not by recognition, but by transformation. "Harper, we need to talk," he said, voice strained. She didn't flinch, didn't tremble, didn't shrink. "No," she answered calmly. "You need to listen." Several parents turned, watching. Brandon paled, realizing he no longer held the power in this dynamic. Harper lifted her chin. "I'm done being afraid of you." It was a quiet sentence, but it landed louder than any accusation. In that moment, she felt something inside her click into place. A piece of herself she thought had been lost forever. She wasn't the woman he broke. She was the woman who rebuilt herself. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. The winter showcase began with a ripple of applause as parents settled into velvet-lined seats, their conversations floating beneath the soft glow of the chandeliers. Harper stood backstage, headset on, clipboard in hand, calmly directing volunteers and adjusting lighting cues. No one watching her now would ever guess the turmoil she had once carried. Tonight wasn't just a school event. It was the stage where everything would finally turn. And she wasn't the only one who sensed it. Brandon moved through the crowd with the uneasy stiffness of a man walking into a room full of knives. He was trying, failing to hide it behind a forced smile. But the whispers were everywhere. "Did you hear what he said last night? Is the boy really his? Why would he say something like that out loud?" Reputation, once his favorite armor, now sliced him from the inside. From backstage, Harper watched him scan the room. This time, he wasn't looking for investors or admirers. He was looking for her. But she had no intention of letting him dictate the moment. As the children moved into position for the opening number, Harper stepped into the wings beside Rowan. His voice was low, steady. "You sure you're ready for this?" She nodded. "I've been ready for 6 years." The curtain rose, and the hall filled with soft orchestral music as children danced across the stage, including Milo, whose energy lit the room like a sparkler. His laughter carried into the crowd, and Harper felt that familiar sting of fierce, protective pride. Then came the moment she planned for. Midway through the performance, the lights dimmed for a narrated montage projected onto the backdrop, a tradition Ridgeview used every year to honor the students' journeys. But this year, Harper had edited it herself. Images of Milo filled the screen, his first day of school, his drawings, his joyful grin. Then came a slide with the caption, "Every child deserves to be wanted." A murmur spread instantly across the audience, soft, questioning, electric. Brandon stiffened in his seat. Another slide appeared. "Every mother deserves to be believed." Parents shifted, whispering louder now. Some glanced directly at Brandon. And then the last image. Milo's face, smiling bright and unmistakably identical to a younger photo of Brandon, pulled from a public magazine feature. The resemblance was undeniable, irrefutable, devastating. Brandon shot to his feet, fury and panic twisting his features. "Harper, how dare you?" His voice cracked loudly enough for half the hall to hear. Harper stepped out from the wings, standing tall, calm, unshaken. "It's the truth," she said simply. The room fell silent, and in that silence, the man who once controlled everything realized. He no longer controlled the narrative. Not the story, not his image, not her. Tonight, the world had finally seen who he really was. Gasps rippled through the audience, swelling into a wave of murmurs that crashed against the velvet walls of Ridgeview's theater. The montage had ended, but its echo lingered like smoke thick, impossible to ignore, impossible to unsee. Brandon stood center aisle, breathing hard, his polished image collapsing faster than he could hold it together. His fingers shook as he jabbed a hand toward the screen, then toward Harper. "You think this proves anything?" he barked, though his voice trembled. "You think you can humiliate me in front of the whole board, in front of investors?" But it wasn't humiliation driving his panic. It was truth. And truth, for a man like Brandon, was the one thing he couldn't buy, erase, or outmaneuver. Parents exchanged glances, some pitying, some disgusted, most curious. Ridgeview families were used to scandals, but never one this raw, this personal, this morally lopsided. Harper stepped onto the stage, calm as moonlight. "This isn't about humiliating you," she said. "This is about finally saying what should have been said years ago." Brandon laughed too loudly. "You stole my child from me." The room recoiled. Rowan rose from his seat in the front row, eyes sharp. "You told her to get rid of that child," he said evenly. "We all heard you last night." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Stay out of this." "I won't," Rowan replied, stepping closer. "Not when a woman who fought for her child is being blamed by the man who abandoned them both." Gasps again, this time sharper, more decisive. Harper felt something tighten in her throat. For years, she had fought alone. Now, someone fought beside her. Brandon's face twisted with the desperation of a man losing control of every thread he once gripped. "Harper, you don't get to rewrite history." "I don't have to rewrite it," she said softly. "You wrote it yourself. I'm only done hiding it." Milo, still in costume, stepped out from the wings at that moment, wide-eyed, innocent, unaware of the impact of simply existing. His presence was a mirror Brandon couldn't escape. The audience fell utterly silent. Brandon's voice cracked. "The boy? He's really—" Harper nodded once. "He's yours, and he's everything you feared, proof you were wrong." Brandon swayed, the world tilting underneath him. For the first time since she had known him, Harper saw not arrogance, not ambition, not cruelty. She saw a man facing the consequences of his own choices. This was the moment his kingdom began to crumble. And the moment hers began to rise. The showcase ended, but the echo of everything that happened lingered like a storm refusing to leave the skyline. Parents trickled out of the auditorium in tight clusters, whispering behind manicured hands, their eyes darting between Harper, Rowan, and the man unraveling near the exit. Brandon wasn't the center of the room anymore. He was the warning whispered about at the edges. Harper guided Milo toward the dressing area, trying to shield him from the tension crackling through the air. But before she could slip away, Brandon blocked her path with a shaky breath and a face drained of color. "Harper, I need to talk to you, please." The please was new, unsteady, almost foreign to his mouth. Rowan stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between them, not aggressive, just protective in a way that made Harper's heart pull tight. Harper touched Rowan's arm gently. "It's okay. I'll hear him out." Reluctantly, Rowan nodded, staying close enough to intervene if needed. Brandon took a breath like a man swallowing broken glass. "I didn't know. I didn't think, Harper. Why didn't you tell me he was mine?" Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It simply held the weight of everything he had forced her to endure. "Brandon, you told me to get rid of him. You made your decision long before I made mine." His eyes flickered, shame and panic warring in his expression. "People say stupid things in fear. I was young, I was overwhelmed." "You were cruel," Harper corrected softly, "and you didn't want to change." He flinched. For a moment, he wasn't the powerful real estate mogul Manhattan admired. He was a man stripped of his excuses, staring at the consequence he had spent years avoiding. "I want to be in his life," Brandon whispered. "He's my son. I deserve a chance." The air froze. Harper felt her stomach twist. Not in fear this time, but in anger. "You deserve a chance?" Her voice stayed calm, but it carried steel. "What Milo deserves is safety, stability, love. You didn't give those things to me when he needed you most." Brandon looked at Milo, who was now stacking tiny wooden blocks on a backstage table, humming to himself. Innocent, unaware, Harper continued, quieter now. "You can't walk back into a child's life just because your reputation is at risk." His eyes flashed, the old entitlement surfacing. "This isn't about my reputation." Harper tilted her head. "Isn't it?" The truth hung heavy between them. Then Milo looked up and waved at Rowan, pure, joyful, trusting. Rowan waved back, warm and soft-eyed. And Brandon saw it, saw what true connection looked like, saw what he had thrown away. His jaw tightened. "This isn't over." Harper exhaled slowly. "No," she said. "But for once, you're not the one in control." Brandon left Ridgeview that night with the uneven gait of a man walking through the wreckage of his own making. His car waited outside, sleek, black, expensive, but even luxury couldn't hide the shaking in his hands as he unlocked the door. Cameras flashed from across the street. A reporter shouted a question he pretended not to hear. He'd lost control of the moment, And now the world smelled blood. Meanwhile, Harper remained backstage, kneeling beside Milo as he packed away his costume into a little plastic bin covered in stickers. Rowan lingered nearby, giving her space but refusing to leave until he knew she was steady. "You did the right thing," Rowan said gently. Harper let out a slow breath. It didn't feel good. It just needed to be said. "That's what the truth often is," Rowan replied. "Necessary, not easy." Before she could respond, Principal Hanover approached, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Harper," she said, voice low but warm, "I saw what happened tonight. Are you all right?" "Yes," Harper answered. "I think I am." The principal nodded, hesitating before adding, "I don't know the full story, but I do know this. You handled yourself with grace most people can't summon under pressure." Those words meant more than Harper expected. For years, she had survived in silence. Tonight, she had spoken. After collecting Milo's things, Harper stepped into the cold December air. Glittering city lights reflected off the thin layer of frost on the sidewalk. She pulled her coat tighter, Milo's small gloved hand tucked into hers. That's when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, until a second text came through. "Miss Lorraine, this is Attorney Sloan Morgan. We need to discuss Mr. Keats' behavior and the legal implications. Please call at your earliest convenience." Her stomach tightened. More texts followed. "A board member from Ridgeview. If you need support, you have it. A parent. The way he spoke to you was unacceptable. Another. We stand with you. Support. Unexpected. Powerful." As she scrolled, one final message appeared from the city's largest real estate blog. "Breaking. Brandon Keats heard admitting he pressured ex-wife to terminate pregnancy. Source. Multiple witnesses present." Harper froze. Rowan, noticing the shift in her expression, stepped closer. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. He read the headline, jaw tightening not with anger at her, but for her. "This is going to spiral," he said softly. "Yes," Harper whispered, "because truth didn't just hurt. It echoed. It changed reputations. It shifted power. It demanded justice. And for a man like Brandon, who had built his empire on polished lies, the fall was only just beginning." The morning after the winter showcase, Manhattan woke up hungry for scandal, and Brandon Keats was the perfect meal. News alerts pinged across phones, headlines dripping with the kind of drama people pretended not to enjoy, but devoured anyway. Real estate mogul Heard, admitting he pressured ex-wife to terminate pregnancy. Ridgeview Academy witnesses explosive confrontation. Within hours, commentators were speculating on investor reactions, boardroom damage control, and whether Brandon's company, Keats Urban Developments, could withstand the blow. Meanwhile, Harper sat at her small kitchen table, Milo coloring beside her, while Rowan brewed coffee like he'd done it in her space 100 times. The warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the storm swirling outside. "You okay?" Rowan asked gently as he handed her a mug. Harper nodded, though her fingers trembled around the porcelain. "I didn't expect things to go this far." "You didn't push anything," Rowan reminded her. "You told the truth. What happens next? That's on him." But the truth had momentum, and momentum didn't slow down just because she felt overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from attorneys, parents, journalists. She ignored most of them, until one message appeared from an unfamiliar number. "Miss Lorraine, this is Amelia Price from the New York Legal Defense Network. We provide free legal protection for women facing threats from former partners. Given Mr. Tector, Keats' rising hostility, we strongly advise you speak with us." Rowan read the message over her shoulder, concern flickering across his face. "He's not going to take this quietly." Harper said. He never did. Across town, Brandon paced his penthouse like a man possessed. Every call from investors was colder than the last. His PR team begged him to stay quiet, but he couldn't. He needed control. He needed the narrative back. He needed Harper to cooperate. He dialed her number again. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. His rage simmered into something darker, a sense of slipping, drowning, losing everything he believed was owed to him. But Harper wasn't hiding. She was preparing. At noon, she met with Ridgeview's board in a quiet conference room overlooking Central Park. Some faces held sympathy, others held worry, but what surprised her most was how many held respect. One board member cleared his throat. Harper, given last night's events, Brandon Keats may attempt to discredit you. We'd like to assure you the school supports you fully. Another added, and if he pressures us regarding real estate negotiations, we will document everything. Harper blinked. Real estate negotiations? The board exchanged looks. Keats Urban Developments has been trying to acquire the land behind the school for months, the chairman said. It borders a property under your grandmother's name. We assumed you knew. Her breath caught. No, she hadn't known. Not yet. And that missing piece of information would change everything. Harper felt the room tilt, though she kept her expression steady. My grandmother owned land behind the school? She asked quietly. The board members exchanged uncertain glances, as if they realized they may have revealed something she was never meant to hear this way. Yes, Chairman Lawson confirmed. A small parcel, barely half an acre, but strategically positioned. Developers have been trying to buy it for years. And my grandmother? She never sold it? No. In fact, she left strict instructions in her will that it should never be transferred without your explicit consent. Harper's pulse quickened. She sat back slowly, her mind racing not with fear, but with the slow, dawning awareness that fate had handed her something she didn't even know she possessed. A piece of land, behind Ridgeview Academy, desired by one man in particular. Brandon. Lawson continued. We assumed you were already aware, since Mr. Keats' team approached us several times referencing your name in the ownership timeline. Harper's eyebrows knit. They referenced my name? Yes, he insisted he had access to the property through marital ties. We pushed back, but the chairman hesitated. He seemed very confident. Confident. Of course he was. He always assumed she would bend. Even in absence, he believed she was still under his control. Harper steadied her breath. May I see the documents? Within minutes, Lawson slid a folder across the table, scanned copies of old deeds, signatures, property maps. She flipped through them, her finger pausing over the most shocking detail. Her legal name, Harper Lorraine Keats. She had kept her maiden name after the divorce, but legally, on paper, her married name had remained in limbo because she never processed the reinstatement forms. Brandon must have known. He must have counted on it. And worse, he believed she would stay passive, uninformed, irrelevant. But standing in that conference room, winter sunlight pouring over the long oak table, Harper felt the shape of the story shifting. Not just the story of the land, but the story of her life. Rowan, seated beside her, saw the change in her posture. What does this mean for you? He asked softly. Harper closed the folder with a quiet finality. It means, she said, voice calm but carrying steel. Brandon's entire project depends on property he doesn't own, property he assumed I would hand over without question. A murmur rippled among the board members. And will you? Lawson asked cautiously. Harper looked out the window at the courtyard, where Milo was chasing snowflakes as if the world had never hurt him. Her jaw set. No, she said, not now, not ever. She rose, gathering the documents. The board watched her with admiration, with awe, and maybe with a little fear. Because for the first time, Harper wasn't just surviving. She was holding the leverage. And Brandon Keats had no idea the ground was already crumbling beneath him. Brandon didn't wait long to make his move. By late afternoon, Harper received a terse email from Keats Urban Developments requesting an urgent meeting regarding mutually beneficial land negotiations. The message was dressed in corporate politeness, but the subtext was unmistakable. He finally realized he needed her. For a brief second, she stared at the glowing screen, astonished at the irony. 6 years ago, she was the one begging him to listen, to consider her heart, to value the life growing inside her. And he had dismissed her as if she were disposable. Now he needed something from her. Something only she could give. Something she would never surrender. She replied with a single sentence. There is nothing to negotiate. Minutes later, her phone rang. She didn't have to look at the caller ID. Harper, Brandon snapped the moment she answered. You're making a mistake. No, she said calmly. I'm correcting one. You don't understand what's at stake, he hissed. My company has invested millions. Investors are waiting. I have deadlines. You should have thought about that before you tried to erase your own child. Silence. Sharp, cutting. Then a low, dangerous exhale. You're doing this out of spite. Harper almost laughed. Brandon, you can't call it spite when it's simply consequences. In the background, she could hear voices, advisors, attorneys, someone urging him to stay composed. But he couldn't. Because losing control, especially to her, was his greatest fear. Listen to me, he growled. Your grandmother's land solves a major city contract. If I don't secure it, the project collapses. I collapse. Harper leaned back against her kitchen counter, watching Milo build a tower of crayons, blissfully unaware of the storm his existence had created. And why, she asked softly, should I save the man who refused to save us? He faltered. I didn't know, he muttered. Back then, I wasn't ready. You weren't willing. Harper corrected. There's a difference. Before he could respond, Rowan entered the room carrying grocery bags, offering her a warm smile. Brandon must have heard his voice. Is that him? Brandon snapped. Is that the man pretending to be Milo's father? Stop. Harper's tone turned cold. Rowan has done more for Milo than you ever attempted. He's not his father. Harper looked at Milo, safe, loved, happy. Yes, she said quietly, he is. In all the ways that matter. Brandon's breath hitched, shock slicing into him deeper than anger ever could. This isn't over, he whispered, but it sounded more like a plea than a threat. Harper ended the call. For the first time, she didn't feel fear when Brandon said those words. She felt clarity, because the balance had finally shifted, and she held every card he once believed she'd never dared to touch. Brandon Keats had been called many things in Manhattan's business circles. Visionary, ruthless, unstoppable. But no one had ever used the word that now clung to him like a stain. Desperate. From the top floor of the Keats Urban Developments Tower, he stared at the Manhattan skyline with a hollow expression. The city lights that once energized him now looked like 100 accusing eyes. His assistant hovered in the doorway, uncertain. Sir? 3 more investors pulled out this morning. He didn't respond. And the city council postponed the vote on your redevelopment plan. They cited ethical concerns. Still nothing. And the legal department says, unless you secure Miss Lorraine's signature, the entire project may be considered structurally compromised. Get out, Brandon snapped. The assistant fled. He sank into his leather chair, pressing his palms into his temples. His empire, his identity, was slipping through his fingers faster than he could salvage it. And worst of all, every headline tied his downfall to her. Harper Lorraine. He whispered her name like a curse, or maybe a confession. He picked up his phone again, fingers trembling. He didn't dial her number. Not this time. He searched her name, instead photos of her, as Ridgeview's event designer, glowing reviews of her work, parents praising her kindness. There were pictures of Milo, too, and in every one of them, Brandon saw a truth he had refused to face. The child he didn't want had become the evidence of everything he lost. Across town, Harper stood in the warmth of Ridgeview's art room, helping Milo wash glitter off his hands. Rowan leaned against the counter, watching the soft scene unfold. You know, Rowan said quietly, he's unraveling. Men like Brandon, they don't break gracefully. Harper sighed. I don't want revenge. I just want him to stop hurting us. I know, Rowan's voice softened, but sometimes consequences chase people whether we want them to or not. She nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Back in his tower, Brandon finally grabbed his coat and stormed toward the elevator. His footsteps were uneven, half anger, half panic. He wasn't headed to a board meeting. He wasn't heading to his office. He was heading to Ridgeview. He needed to face Harper, to force her to see him, to plead or threaten, he didn't know which. He only knew he was losing everything, and she was the axis around which his entire world was collapsing. As he drove through the city, traffic lights streaking across his windshield, one thought consumed him. If he lost the land, he lost the project. If he lost the project, he lost the company. If he lost the company, he lost everything. And the only person who could save him was the woman he once tried to break. The afternoon sun cast long golden beams across Ridgeview's courtyard as Harper zipped Milo's jacket and prepared to walk him home. Parents chatted nearby, teachers waved goodbye, and holiday decorations shimmered against the frosted windows. Everything felt peaceful, until Brandon's car screeched into the roundabout. He stepped out with the frantic intensity of a man no longer pretending to be composed. His suit was wrinkled, tie crooked, hair disheveled, a man stripped of every polished illusion. Harper instinctively placed a hand on Milo's shoulder. "Harper," Brandon called, unlocking the tremor in his voice. "We need to talk." Now, Rowan, who had been walking toward them from the front doors, stopped instantly, eyes sharp, protective, ready. Harper straightened. "Brandon, this isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," he snapped, glancing around. "Because everything started here, didn't it? Your little performance last night." "It wasn't a performance," she said calmly. "It was the truth." His jaw twitched. "You destroyed me." "No," Harper replied. "You destroyed yourself. I simply stopped covering for you." Parents nearby quieted. They pretended not to watch, but their eyes betrayed their curiosity. And Brandon hated being seen like this, unraveling, cornered, small. "I need that land, Harper," he said through clenched teeth. "If you don't sign it over, my company collapses. Everything I've built, gone." Harper met his gaze with a steadiness she once envied in others. "You built it on lies, intimidation, and people you thought would never stand up to you." "You owe me," he exploded. Those words hung in the air like cold steel. Rowan stepped closer, voice low but firm. "She doesn't owe you anything." Brandon ignored him. "I gave you a life, Harper. You gave me nothing," she cut in, her voice soft but devastating. "I found my life after you left." Her words struck him physically, his shoulders faltered, breath stuttered. Then Milo, who had been quiet, looked up and asked innocently, "Mommy, is he still angry because he made a bad choice?" Gasps slipped out around them. Brandon's face drained. Harper knelt beside her son. "It's not your job to fix grown-ups' bad choices, sweetheart." Rowan's hand gently touched her back, a silent show of support. Brandon stood frozen, a man finally confronting the truth he spent years outrunning. "You think you've won?" he whispered, voice cracked. "It's not about winning," Harper said, rising to her full height. "It's about finally being free." He stared at her, breathing hard, defeated yet still burning with a last flicker of denial. "This conversation isn't over." Harper turned away, taking Milo's hand. "For me," she said softly, "it is." And as she walked off toward the fading winter light, Rowan matching her stride, Brandon Keats stood in the courtyard, the powerful man who finally realized he had no power left. 2 days later, Manhattan woke to a storm, not of weather, but of headlines. Every major outlet, from business journals to morning talk shows, carried the same explosive story. Whistleblower leaks. Keats Urban Developments under investigation for fraud and coercion. Investors withdraw in mass panic, projected collapse of multi-million-dollar project. Allegations of personal misconduct surface against CEO Brandon Keats. Harper stared at her phone in stunned silence. She hadn't spoken a word publicly. She hadn't leaked anything. She hadn't tried to ruin him. She didn't have to. His actions had done that for him. Rowan read over her shoulder, eyebrows raised. "This is significant." "Too significant," Harper whispered. Someone went digging, and someone had found everything. Across the city, in his penthouse, Brandon's world was imploding. He slammed his laptop shut, chest heaving. Who did this? Who leaked those files? His legal team stammered through excuses, but Brandon wasn't listening. He paced the room like a caged animal, gripping his hair with shaking hands. The documents leaked were damning. Fake permits, falsified zoning claims, investor manipulation. And worst of all, a recorded phone call from years ago, capturing his voice coldly pressuring Harper to terminate her pregnancy. He had forgotten that conversation was ever documented. Someone hadn't. But who? Meanwhile, at Ridgeview Academy, Harper tried to focus on work. Parents greeted her with warmth, teachers offered nods of quiet solidarity. It was surreal. After years of being invisible, she was suddenly seen, respected. But she didn't feel triumphant. She felt cautious. "Do you think Brandon will come after me?" she asked Rowan in a low voice. Rowan shook his head. "He can't afford to. Not now." Yet Harper sensed the storm was still building. That afternoon, Principal Hanover called her into the office, not with concern, with gratitude. "Harper," she said gently, "the board unanimously approved a motion to discontinue all communication with Keats Urban Developments. And given the land you own, we'd like to discuss a community-centered plan that would put you in a position of leadership." Harper blinked. "Leadership? Her? Why me?" she whispered. Hanover smiled. Because you're the only one who's acted with integrity throughout this entire ordeal. Harper felt her throat tighten. Not from fear, from validation she never expected to hear. As she stepped out of the office, Rowan leaned against the wall with a teasing smile. Good news? She nodded, overwhelmed. But before she could tell him, her phone buzzed violently in her hand. Unknown number. A voicemail. She pressed play. Brandon's broken voice spilled through the speaker. Harper, please. I need your help. They're investigating everything. My company is dying. I'm losing everything. Please call me back. You're the only one who can fix this. Harper lowered the phone slowly. The man who once tried to erase her existence now begged for her to save his. And she knew, without hesitation, she wouldn't. For the first time in years, Harper felt the world slow down just enough for her to breathe. Not the frantic, shallow breaths of survival, but the grounded kind that belonged to someone who had finally stepped out of the shadows. The investigation into Brandon intensified daily. Reporters camped outside his office, investors abandoned him. City officials distanced themselves with carefully crafted statements. His empire, once untouchable, now crumbled with every headline. But Harper? Her life gently bloomed. Rowan invited her and Milo to a small winter fair along the Hudson River. The lights shimmered across the water, casting reflections that danced like small galaxies beneath the sky. Milo ran ahead toward the carousel, his laughter echoing with the kind of innocence Harper once feared he would never get to experience. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left him? Rowan asked, as they watched Milo climb onto a painted horse. Harper wrapped her scarf tighter. Sometimes, but the woman who stayed is not the woman I am now. Rowan looked at her, really looked. You're stronger than you know. She met his eyes, warmth spreading through her. I had to be. He hesitated, then spoke the words he'd held for years. Harper, the night I first met you at the clinic, I never forgot you. I didn't know your name, but I remembered your courage. Her breath caught. All this time, he continued softly, I hoped you'd find your way to a life that loved you back. I didn't expect to be part of it, but I'm grateful I am. Harper felt something inside her unlock, something she'd kept barricaded behind fear and memory. She didn't answer him with words. Instead, she let the silence between them soften, deepen, become something tender. Milo hopped off the carousel and ran toward them, cheeks pink from the cold. Mommy, Dr. Rowan, did you see me? Rowan lifted him high with ease. You were incredible. Harper felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from a quiet, overwhelming gratitude. As they walked back through the twinkling lights, Rowan gently brushed a snowflake from her hair. You don't owe him anything, he murmured, but you deserve everything you've been denied. She didn't look away this time. I'm starting to believe that. When they reached the river's edge, Harper paused, staring out over the shimmering water. For the first time, she wasn't looking back. She was looking forward. Behind her, Brandon's world burned. Ahead of her, a new life waited steady, warm, entirely her own. And just like that, our story comes to a close. If you're still here with us at this moment, my friend, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a way words alone can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, you recognized a part of yourself in Harper's strength, her fear, her healing, or her rise. Life has a quiet way of reminding us that we're stronger than the storms we survive. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." And Harper's story is living proof. What tried to break her became the doorway to the life she truly deserved. Sometimes, the world won't give us justice, but we can choose freedom. Sometimes people won't give us kindness, but we can choose to be kinder to ourselves. Sometimes love fails us. Only so better love can find its way. If this story reached you, stayed with you, or healed a small corner of your heart, then don't go quietly. Leave a like, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe to stay with our little community here. You're not alone, and your story, just like Harper's, is still unfolding.